It's such a sad, sad time. Just looking at Bitcoin price action, I'm looking at NASDAQ's price action, looking at the semiconductor sell off. What a week.
Yeah, I know. Everything has been selling off, and there's actually really no explanation to explain why, other than just the system and technicals are saying everything's overbought. So, let's talk about the Nasdaq first and explain why that's selling off.
Yeah.
Um, Based on the system we're looking at, it has, you know, been on a good uptrend, but over the last month or so, it has been rejected by our overbought zones. It went down to the rally zone, comes back up, and gets rejected again. And it has now, in the last two pullbacks, it has broken the KRM line. And again, I think we're seeing a bit of that happening right now on QQQ.
I mean, at this point, I would say NASDAQ is in a choppy market. I mean, at least that's what our model suggests, is that right now, NASDAQ is no longer in a full growth momentum. It's actually in a choppy momentum. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. In last week's podcast, I'm still on the idea that we're in a very strange scenario where the macros aren't too good, but we'll talk about it in a bit. They might be good. The macros aren't good, but we're growing on just the expectation of rate cut. Now, I think I was pushed back on that today or yesterday when the GDP came out, and then the GDP was stronger than expected, and that's why So we started seeing the sentiment going up over the week. We saw the GDP. We saw the growth that came from it. And well, today we had another data drop. This is a very, very strange day. Out the market data today. Market data was as what forecasted. The forecast was you'll see a slight increase in personal income, a slight increase in spending, and the PC remaining the same. Great. You would think this is disaster for market to continue has been continuing, but no. The market saw that today's data and had a certain change of heart. Like it's actually very chaotic. This happened like 9 out of 10 times. The data comes out as expected. The market goes on as expected. Nothing
Yeah,
changes. Today was a
yeah.
very strange day.
It has been very strange. And what's stranger has been Bitcoin's price action, right? So looking at Bitcoin, it has been completely rejected by the all-time highs. It's no longer anywhere near the 120s or 110s. In fact, today it's sold off the whole day, and it's currently at 107, 108. And I think we mentioned this before in the last episode, but Bitcoin's price action has foreshadowed what we're seeing in the overall market, which is just broad weakness relative to what we've seen in July and early August. And I think that a lot of this weakness is potentially due to stagflationary pressures that the market isn't sure if it's going to be resolved, or is it going to be exacerbated by another rate cut come September.
But I mean, Bitcoin is doing something really strange. Like, we saw Bitcoin, looks like the peak happened on the 13th of August. And, since
Mhm.
that day, if you compare the Bitcoin to NASDAQ, on the 13th, there was also a peak, or around there was a peak. And the market
Yep.
slightly sold off, and then it recovered back. But Bitcoin has been on a sell off. And,
Yep.
this is not what we expect to see. But I think what you're gonna mention in a moment is that there have been quite of more Bitcoin specific actors that are driving the price action.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk about that. Recently, over the last weekend, so yeah, so I think Saturday, Sunday, there's a fat red candle that really just ripped apart the rally that we saw last Friday, and everyone was spooked out. And initially, there were questions about what was happening, and it was, later found out that a whale liquidated his, 24,000 Bitcoin holding and pivoted towards Ethereum. So
Hmm.
when you compare the pricing of Bitcoin to Ethereum, we've been seeing some strange action where Ethereum is much more resilient in pricing, where it hits the all-time highs, rips them very quickly, gets rejected, goes around the KRM line, and then just hovers there. It's been weaker now, and I think that's just because it's been following Bitcoin's price action and all of crypto in general. But so far, it's been a much more favorable asset to hold if you were, an options trader, for example, because Bitcoin has just been making lower highs and lower lows every other 5 days, every other week, right? So there's been questions on whether or not maybe we're seeing other cryptocurrencies taking up the dominance of trading for cryptocurrencies over Bitcoin,
Right.
because it seems that Bitcoin is now less volatile and you're less likely to earn a substantial amount of returns compared to other cryptocurrencies.
I mean, if you look at the charts themselves too, we're seeing like a rotation into crypto, as you said. Solana, XRP not so much, but definitely Solana is also doing quite well. While Bitcoin is just, it's a big rotation out of Bitcoin. I think on the thing about Bitcoin, I think I saw news about BlackRock, shifting their investments out of Bitcoin into Ethereum as well. So we're seeing like an institutional play happening on Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I wonder about that. Why other altcoins are taking Bitcoin's dominance, especially Ethereum, and why I have to do some more digging on this, which can be later discussed next week's episode. But I believe that Ethereum plays a part in the overall AI infrastructure that's being built out in terms of tokenizations. And I think a lot of institutional investors and whales are seeing that opportunity, and that is why they're pivoting towards Ethereum.
I mean, to be
So,
completely in the defense of Ethereum was always had more value than Bitcoin because I believe Ethereum is used as a tradable agreement. Whereas it's not only just a currency, it's also a contractually binding agreement of some sort. So Ethereum always had more value, and it always surprised me how Bitcoin kept rising higher and higher just on the backing of it being a currency and one that's kind of popular. So I've always compared Bitcoin to modern day gold, or the modern day
yeah,
equivalent of gold, where it really doesn't do all too much, but it looks kind of fancy, and that's the equivalent of it in the modern era.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so I think Bitcoin, we can talk more about this next week too. I think Bitcoin is a very, very strange asset. And for a very long time, I think for the last 2 years, we've been seeing Bitcoin kind of become a proxy for macro and risk on. And so when macro was bad, or when the sentiment was changing about how risky the market was being, Bitcoin was the asset that was responding first. I think
yes,
I think this is quite surprising to me because this doesn't happen too often. I think it has happened in the last 2 years, like a couple times, but
yeah,
typically Bitcoin doesn't delineate too much from this more macro risk on sentiment entity.
yeah. I agree with you. I think that when I pay attention to Bitcoin's price action, if I see the price action of Bitcoin isn't acting familiar anymore, so when you buy the dip just keeps on going, that's will give me some sort of inkling on what the Nasdaq will do. And since Bitcoin's weakness, I've seen the Nasdaq continually break the KRM line over and over again, and I think it may be signaling a shift in the current regime that we're in. It could also just be another price action thing that is hard to describe. But given the fact with all the tariff chaos that we are still kind of entangling, and now with uncertainty around the Fed rate cuts, plus the Trump administration trying to outright fire a Fed governor, there's just a lot of news in the air. And I think because of August's seasonality as well, playing a factor into all of this, it's creating a cumulative weakness moving from August to September.
I mean, we should probably let our viewers know, those who aren't aware, that going into September, and September typically tends to be a more negative month, year after
It
year.
is.
And I think like, so, well, I think what we're seeing is a compounding effect. I think definitely you're right. I don't think I actually thought of that right now. But I think, I'm actually personally very confused as to the direction of the market. It feels like a push and a pull. Like one day I'm being told the macros aren't as bad. The other day I see a sell-off in semiconductors because I don't know, something happened. And I'm really confused what's really happening. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't like throwing around words like the AI bubble very like, very often, at least in a serious
Yeah.
context. But it really does feel like there's definitely some kind of overvaluation that's happening in the market. Things are
Yeah.
far too overvalued, and
No.
I feel like we should be macro-wise, we should be seeing growth. We shouldn't be seeing these hiccups, but
You're right.
we're something is happening. Is my inkling. But I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on what's really happening.
Yeah, like I'm trying to put an inkling myself, and what I see is that the defensives are getting sold off, XLU is getting shot,
Yeah.
and XLV had some sell off, but it's been pretty resilient. But the biggest takeaway that I noticed this far is gold. Gold has been doing extraordinarily well.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I think this has to do with more as like the U.S. currency being, well, the U.S. federal policy being a bit weak, or potentially under threat.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, you know what? I think gold. I think we've been keep saying this. I think we should take our advice. We should put money in gold. Unironically.
I know. I should just put my life savings, all into long dated call options on gold.
I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one. I don't know that one.
Creating a hedge for the current administration. But like, I say this every episode now, right? When we record this, but every time I say this, we laugh. But I've been proven right. Like this joke that I make, it's been proven right. And had I done that, we would be paying off right now.
Yeah. We would be like double our investments, double our returns. Yep.
Exactly, right?
Yep.
So for some reason, I think that investors are taking away capital from just equities at large and moving them to a risk off asset, which is essentially gold. And I'm looking at the system here. Gold is definitely flagging out in terms of being overbought, extremely overbought. So there might be a pullback that might give you guys an opportunity to lock in on gold to hedge some risk. But at the same time, though, we've been looking at the system for other tickers, and there's been a lot of sales.
Yeah. Very sell-off market. It's very strange. I don't really understand what's happening. I mean, from what you told me, let's look at the NVIDIA earnings. The NVIDIA earnings, right? NVIDIA beat their EPS by like, I think it's a very, very small amount. It doesn't really matter what they beat. It's like 4%, so nothing too much. But we saw NVIDIA, the moment after the earnings came out, it was actually quite negative, right? The day overnight was negative, or the evening. Only the morning did it come back to like the healthy level. But even today, we're just seeing, a huge sell for NVIDIA. I think you were mentioning something about Alibaba.
Yeah. So essentially, some news that I picked up on the wins is that we know that there has been tech restrictions between the U.S. and China for years now, and there was a risk that the Chinese military would be using NVIDIA chips to train their AIs for military use, and also to begin outcompeting American companies in AI development. So as a response, successive U.S. government administrations, not just the Trump administration, but even the Biden administration, has been creating restrictions so that companies like NVIDIA cannot sell their chips to China. Alibaba has recently came out and announced that they developed an AI chip And markets believe that may pose a threat to American dominance in AI infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
within the Chinese market, and that has catalyzed the selling, or that has justified the selling within the semiconductor companies. Would that be the only reason why the market is selling off? I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so.
so. No.
I think everything we've discussed, including seasonality, really plays a role in it. And markets was just itching to sell off, given any sort of reason. It didn't matter what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that is the only reason why market is selling off, especially for semiconductors, but it could play a role in this to explain why the sector itself, only semis, are showing a lot of weakness. Because I'm getting news that Google has been doing really well today, so it's
Oh
not
yeah.
all companies. Yeah,
Google is
yeah,
all-time highs. It's just been in a consistent growth since their earnings.
yeah.
So
So yeah, do you want
quite
to talk about
surprised.
that?
I mean, I feel like I'm not sure what's happening with Google. I'm not sure why they are growing. Do you know what's happening with Google? I'm not up to the news.
I'm not particularly sure. It's not a company that I've been eyeing, just because Google has been quite overbought, to
Yeah,
be frank.
yeah.
So I've been paying attention to other companies instead. I understand that they have been investing a lot in AI as well, including building new infrastructures. But I'm not too well informed on why it's been making new all-time highs. I
I think
think the last time
it's
we
because
talked
of
about this,
Gemini, right? The Gemini and Apple.
yeah, yeah. So I was just gonna say, I think based on the last conversation we had about Google, it was mainly because of collaborations with other tech companies that
Hmm.
cause it to have such a growth spurt.
Yeah, their cloud compute, and like I think they're now potential of future collaboration with Apple for their new product for the OpenAI. It's kind of very, very interesting. What's happening there?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to move ahead to just explain if there's any other events we should look for next week.
Hmm.
I know that Monday is Labor Day,
Yeah.
right? So I think the Canadian market is obviously closed, but I am not sure if the U.S. market is also closed. I think it is.
Is it? Can you make sure?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the U.S. economic calendar. Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems to be closed.
Okay.
And we are looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. There's like employment data, job openings,
Hmm.
U.S. manufacturing PMI, and there's unemployment rate report. So big news
Oh,
next
that is
coming
big
week.
news. I mean,
It is, yeah.
the Fed was concerned about labor as opposed to inflation, so that's going to be, I think, the headline to look at next week. Ooh, we're in a very, very interesting scenario. I feel like the market is just looking for any reason to sell off. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen going into next week. I would just urge caution. Like, what's their sentiment? What are you thinking here?
I am cautious,
Mhm.
although
You are
I
optimistic
think
though, right? I mean, from what
I
I'm seeing
think
you post in our chats.
yeah. I think I am optimistic because the system says that a lot of things, specifically like Nvidia, for example, has been oversold. So I personally, locked in some calls on Nvidia. Let's see how it plays out.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, based on our system, it will most likely, have a good payoff. It will respond, but who knows? Maybe some sort of bad data comes out, or the Trump administration release some sort of tweet. Something can happen, but at
Yeah.
least I know that a whale will not dump Nvidia stocks, which will drive the price lower
I mean, just to
over the
add on as a
weekend.
quick side topic, I think another reason why
Yeah.
the markets have kind of been less U.S. centric, or less confident in U.S. equities is because of recent investment of the U.S. government into Intel, and I feel like there are real concerns from people about the U.S. government dipping their feet into more private companies like NVIDIA, and profit sharing, revenue sharing from there. So I think
Yeah.
I don't. Is that? Do you think that's big? I'm not really sure if that's big, but I did see that quite often show up in analyst posts. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't really confirm if it's fake or
Hmm.
not. I'd have to kind of like dig deep into it.
Yeah.
All I know about Intel is that it got acquired. so whether or not that posed a risk to its long-term future is yet to be determined. And I hope that an investment of the government into Intel will allow it the financial resource to make the investments it actually needs in order to compete with its rivals.
I hope the U.S. government is not investing again in any company. That's what I hope. I hope they stop.
Me too. Me too. I think that when a government is too intertwined with companies such as these, it can breed potential opportunities for corruption and kickbacks. We don't really want that. We want them to be separated, right? If the government really wants to get invested in the companies, it can create a sovereign wealth fund so that the money gets allocated into an ETF, right? So it could be equally distributed. But picking and choosing winners and losers like this, there's a lot of risk because these companies are essentially getting an implicit bailout that if they go down because of their incompetence, well, the government will just come and bail them out whenever they're struggling. So that creates a moral hazard. And we've seen that I don't think the average American taxpayer would appreciate bailing out companies that are choosing to be complacent.
Yeah, I mean, I also, as I keep talking about, like, again and again, I feel like, the confidence in the U.S. is kind of diminishing, especially in the monetary sense. We had China pulling out like $500 million, more than that. We see like actions which is very rare for the U.S. as a government, as a body to ever do. So I don't know. I feel like I'm losing a bit of confidence in the U.S., especially about how they keep adding more and more into their spending and more debt. So
Yeah.
yep, long-term concerns. Let us know if you want us to, hear us talk about, the long-term, a deep dive into the U.S.'s monetary policy and everything like that. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. I think we'll
Yeah.
probably end off there. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No. I think we brought up all the important topics for this week.
Yeah, yeah, that was good. I think we'll sign off there. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe.
Yeah.